This is cs952, Introduction to Web Technologies and Design, and here we are looking at our page where we just added that really nice looking image, but we have this unwanted 20 pixels of space between our navigation and our image. So how did this happen? Well, the Bootstrap framework has a margin, an extra space of 20 pixels at the bottom of most of their major elements. And they do this so that as you add things to the page, there's always a little bit of space between elements. It always guarantees that your layout's not going to look too crammed. Well, for our particular case, we don't want that 20 pixels of space. We actually want the picture to be right next to the bottom of our navigation. We want a nice tight look there. So how do we change that? Remember, anytime we want to change the way something appears, that is going to be a change to our CSS. So let's have a look at our CSS. So we have several sources here in our CSS to work with. We have the Bootstrap. Now, the Bootstrap read-only file, that's actually where we're getting this 20 pixel rule from, but we never change our Bootstrap file. And then we have two other files. We have our navigation file and our styles file. So in this case, and probably in this case only, we're going to change our navigation.css file because I think it makes sense. We're changing the way the navigation looks. Let's save the change to the navigation file. So I'm going to click on navigation.css. Now we have to decide, is this going to be a global rule or just in certain circumstances? We want it to be a global rule. We always want that picture to be right next to the navigation. So let's click global. And for our selector, we're going to choose navbar default. And I'm going to make a little room here so I can see a little bit more of my parameters. So what we want to do is we want to change the margin at the bottom. If we stop to go through our bootstrap.css file, we would see this margin for our navbar, but you'll take my word for it. I hope that it's there. I found it. So I want to write a new rule that says margin is going to be 0. So how do we do that? We go to layout. Layout is in margin. If I scroll down here, I'm going to see margin, and there is my margin. I've got my margin on the top, the right, the bottom, the left, and margin is the space outside of a container. Okay, so if you're parking your car and there's a car next to you, margin is the space that's between your car and the car next to you. Padding is the amount of space you have inside of your car. So we want to decrease the space between these two elements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click for my margin on the bottom, and I'm going to type in 1 pixel, 1. If I just type in 1 and hit enter, by default, Dreamweaver assumes I'm talking about pixels. And look at that. That extra space just went away right like that. But to be honest, I really don't want 1 pixel. I want 0 pixels. So now I'm going to type in 0 and hit enter, and looks even better. I'm going to click on Save All. Let me just mention something for a minute. You'll notice that we have 0 pixels. It's nice, looks nice and sharp here. Around the rest of these margins, we also have 0 pixels, but it's grayed out. If I had put in 0 pixels with nothing else, just straight away put in 0 pixels, Dreamweaver thinks that 0 pixels is equal to no pixels, and it thinks you typed nothing in there. So we get nothing to show up there. So I typed in 1 pixel first because that's a little workaround. In this case, and in this case only, this is a little quirk to Dreamweaver. If you type in 1 pixel, then it writes that new line of code and says, oh, okay, I'm going to write a line of code that says the margin on the bottom is equal to 1 pixel. Then, once I have that line of code written by Dreamweaver, I can go back and change the 1 to a 0. So it's a little quirk to the program. Thought it'd be worth mentioning. And we're now going to move on and tackle other issues. I'm going to use my scrubber. This is my live view scrubber, and I'm going to scrub down to where we get to our small view again. Okay, you can see there's small view. If I switch over here to, that's extra small, where our navigation bar changes, but that's good right there. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to start to add another part to our website, right? We've got our image up there at the top, we want to add another piece to our web page. So I'm looking here at my DOM panel, and I've got my image selected, and you can see it says image class equals image responsive. We're using the Bootstrap image responsive. I can also click on it here in my status bar. Either way, just so long as I have that image selected. And what we're going to do is we're going to add another Bootstrap component. So as you can imagine, we want to go to Insert, and we want to make sure that we have Bootstrap components showing. And we're going to add a container to contain our Bootstrap components. This is how Bootstrap layout works. We have a container. Inside of the container we have a row, and inside of the row there are columns. If we want to use the responsive components in Bootstrap. So I'm going to click on container, and now we get that image again. We get that message again. I saw where it said image. And Dreamweaver is wanting to know, okay, you're going to add in a container. You already have an image. Do you want to add it before the image, after? Do you want to wrap it around, or what? And we're going to say after. Add it after the image. Okay. Now if we look over here in our DOM panel, we can see here is our new div. We don't have anything in there yet. It's kind of hard to see too much of it on the page. But it says div, and the class is equal to container. So now let's add in a grid row with a column. Okay. Now we're in small view, right? We drag this around our live view scrubber to make sure that we're in small. I can see the little SM next to the numbers up there. Okay, we're in small view, and I'm going to click on grid row with column. We're going to add this to our web page, and this time Dreamweaver is asking us, well, where do you want to insert this? Before, after, or nest? We're going to actually answer nest in this case because we want to put this grid row with the columns, we're putting it inside of the container. That's what our container's for. Our container contains things. So we want to put this inside of our container. Now it wants to know how many columns. We only want one column because this is just going to be to hold some featured text about our website. We saw examples earlier where we had 3 columns, and as we resized they would stack differently. In this case, just one column. Okay? And I'm going to say OK. Nest. Let's try that again. I did not hit nest, and say OK, and we've got it. So now if I look here in my DOM view, I can see we've got my container, and inside of my container is this row, and then inside this row we've got another div. So we have a div that's our container. The div contains another div that's a row, and then that div contains another div that's a column, col-sm-12. The size that it's going to attach to this, right now it's saying column sm12. That means that for the viewport width of a small device, which is like a tablet device, right? This thing's going to be 12 columns wide. It's small because we were viewing in small mode when we dropped this in place. If we had been in large mode, it would say column large 12. So that's why we resized to 12. So this thing's always going to be 12 columns wide, because if we go down the next level down to extra small, everything is 12 columns wide because everything always gets stacked in that mode. And then from small size and up, because what we do in a smaller size, those properties are passed down to the larger size. If this thing is 12 columns wide in small view, it's going to be 12 columns wide in medium and 12 columns wide in our large view. So we've got that in there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start adding content inside of our new row that we've created, and we'll do that in the next video.